Hello and welcome to The Agenda Live with me and Josh Russell from the Movement Forward. The Movement Forward. Tell us all about the Movement Forward, Josh.
Hi, yes, the Movement Forward is a campaign for proportional representation and tactical voting. We're kind of combining the two things, like win the next election and reform our democracy so our votes count. That's kind of what we're up to.
Fantastic. So why does our democracy need reforming, Josh?
I think to start with a big question. I think a lot of things come down to representation, really. So, our parliament and the decisions it makes should represent the aspirations and the desires of the country. And so we should always be aiming to get as close as we can to that through the system that elects the people making those decisions. So it should be a continual improvement. So when there's something going wrong in your life or in your community, often it's because a decision has been made on your behalf, and the people making those decisions should properly represent you. I mean, it really is very simple. There's a lot of obvious complexities in how you do that, but the concept is easy. It's representation. It's what democracy was designed to do.
No taxation without representation. Well, the problem is, I mean, it's Firstpastthepost in this country has led us to have a Conservative government for 2/3 of the time in the last 150 years, and a Liberal or a Labour government only 1/3 of the time, which doesn't seem fair, especially when in the last election more people voted for parties that wanted a second referendum than people voted for parties that didn't. So it just seems a little bit unfair to me. What do you think?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and the few times when a majority has selected the government was during the war. It was wartime kind of elections, right? And it was a very different situation then. But yeah, I mean, the point is that regardless of who's been in, it's generally been on a minority of the vote, right? And so half the people in Parliament are then kind of, representing potentially a majority of the people, but unable to do anything for them except argue. And so, yeah, you ideally want, the number of votes cast for a person or a party to be represented in the number of people that end up being in Parliament, right?
But it's in the Tories' interest to have it not that way, though, isn't it? I mean, it's in the Tories' interest to just basically ensure that they get into power the vast majority of times. I mean,
yeah, why change that at all, right?
Well, exactly.
Yeah, and people would then say, oh well, it would be in anyone's favour to keep a system where you don't need to get everyone's vote to have power. But then if you look at the difference between what it would be between the Labour Party and the Conservatives on this note, right? Because people quite rightly say, oh well, the Labour Party didn't get a majority either, did they? It's like, no, they didn't. That's true. Yeah. But if you group up all the votes, actually, there's predominantly always a centre-left progressive vote that just gets split. Yeah. So it's actually, if you take the party's kind of way of dissecting it out of the scenario, you just think about the spectrum of politics, actually people always vote progressive left, centre-left, right? It just gets split in different ways. And so when a Labour Party has been in power, the majority vote has been for the progressive centre-left. Right, because of course, you've got to count the votes for the Lib Dems and the Greens as well. So it's not just between the Conservatives and the Labour Party. When in every single election, pretty much the majority vote has been left, centre, left, progressive.
Yeah, and it seems to me that the way that the electorate puts up with this, and the fact that the Labour Party in particular put up with this system when it never comes down in their favour. So I'm 44 now. I know I don't look it. You don't have to say nothing. But I'm 44, and honestly, I 31 years of my life have been under a Tory government.
Yeah,
31 years, and like that is just outrageous that they've been able to do that. And Labour has floundered around, in the last few elections. Don't even get me started on that. But now they have a real chance of absolutely demolishing the Tories in the next election. And I think it'd be heartbreaking if they don't take the opportunity to bring in proportional representation, because that'll help Labour. It will help, won't it? I mean, it's not just me thinking this, is it?
No, I think that's right. I mean, lots of people have different ideas about what actually might happen under elections under PR. But of course, if you look at the way that people vote, again, people are voting for the left predominantly, right? And so, Labour is a broad church, as we know. Quite a big spectrum of people represented by Labour. But I think, I'm seeing more and more people on social media suggesting that actually that broad church, in one way could include people that vote Lib Dem, people that vote Green, people that vote Plaid Cymru as well. And I kind of think if you don't think about this in the party sense, but think about it in the terms of what people actually want in representation, the Labour Party being the largest of those parties on the left and centre left progressive, I keep saying those three words, but it's, if I don't bunch it together, I get called out. Think about it in that sense, then the Labour Party will probably in perpetuity be leading a progressive caucus that is an even broader church.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the interesting opportunity. And think about it this way. If Labour brought in PR, they would absolutely have the Lib Dems on side at that point. They would absolutely have the Green Party on side at that point. And it'd be very, very hard to do anything, to make our democracy worse again, right?
Well, you say that
the majority of people who had wanted this new system,
and
would there be continued to be elected on it?
But what if the ERG set themselves up as a different party to the Tories, and the Tories plus ERG plus Brexit reform, Refuk party get in as a coalition? And you've basically got a case that you have at the Tories at the moment of the tail wagging the dog, with the ERG deciding what goes down in Tory policy, which is just to destroy everything that was ever, half decent. But do you not worry about that? Do you not worry about the having PR would allow in the extremists? And don't forget, as much as we make fun of Nigel Farage, he's very popular amongst a certain cohort of people, shall we say?
Yeah, but let's not beat around the bush, right?
Idiots. I'll say it. He's very popular with idiots. Oh no, you weren't going to say that. Oh God, this is live. Oh no, cut that.
We've got extremists in government right now, and not just in Parliament, but in government. And if you go back to the previous election, the Brexit Party kind of forced their hand, right? And actually, they went up against the Conservatives to push the Overton window to the right, and now they're essentially running the show. So even though they didn't get any members elected, they kind of did by proxy, right? So you've got a small handful of people running the government already, even though there were 380 MPs. A lot of the backbenchers sit there and do what they're told. So that's the nature of the whip. And actually the strategy is being Brexit directed, right? That's basically what the hill that they have fought that battle on. And again, if you made everyone's votes count, that has to be for everyone, including the people you're not going to agree with. But the point is, you're giving them a seat at the table, just like everyone should have a seat at the table, at the proportion that represent, the aspirations and ideas of the nation, right? And it would be front and centre. It wouldn't be buried in a think tank. They would be sitting in Parliament, accountable like everybody else. Whereas Farage right now is completely unaccountable. He can say whatever he wants, and he's playing by different rules. Give him a seat. It's a very different situation. Everyone gets to see exactly who he is. And alliances have to be made, much more transparently.
But you say give him a seat. It's not like he hasn't got a seat already. I know he hasn't got a seat in Parliament, but he's got one hell of a platform. He just makes a phone call. He's on Question Time. Unquestionably. He had a show on LBC for years in which he just lied to people. He lied to the British people. Giving him an even bigger platform, and a platform where he actually gets to vote in our electoral system, I can see the danger in that. Do you feel in a way that if we are going to have PR, it needs to be done in a smarter way than just saying, okay, well, 20% of the people voted for Green, 40% voted Labour, X% voted Conservative. We'll dole it out in that respect, because there's other ways of doing PR, isn't there? There's the Hunt system. There's a bunch of other systems that we could use. Have you had a thought about what would be the best way for Britain, which is a bit of a silly country if you think about it?
So, there are lots of different ways of doing it. The first thing I would say is whatever we start with, whatever version of PR we start with, needs to be considered version 1, the alpha, whatever you want to call it, right? To be continually improved from there. I think this is a crap analogy, but the first time you got an iPhone, that first iPhone that came out was a bit shit. But you didn't say, oh no, let's get rid of these. This is a terrible idea. I'm going to go back to
I did.
my
But that's
Motorola flip phone.
possibly because
Yeah, but the thing,
I hate Apple.
that's fair enough. But then we had competition with the Android as well. But the point is, that the iPhone was improved, and now we've still got the iPhone. We didn't go back to the old one. So the point about PR is that it might not be perfect, but don't throw it away and go back to what we had. Make it better instead, because what we've got right now clearly isn't working.
It clearly doesn't work.
So in terms of what version, we're Forward Democracy, the organisation that we actually run. We're a member of the Make Votes Matter Alliance. So we're part of their process. And there's a very, very large number of organisations part of that alliance as well. And so whichever process that group comes out in favour of will be the one that we support. And anyone who's got ideas about which particular versions of PR or features to tweak, dials to turn, that's where the influence needs to be put, I think, because there are a lot of different ideas about how it can work, of course.
Well, I'm just having a look at some of the comments that are coming through. Duke saying, hang on. I turned my mic off. Can you hear me again?
Yeah, you're there.
Yeah, sorry. I for some reason my mic went to silent. Everyone's going to be shouting at me in the chat now. You can't hear you. Hopefully you can hear me again now. Sorry, I don't know how.
I'll wait frantically.
I don't know how I pressed the mute button on the front of my mic, but I did. Duke Vengeance is saying take ID with you to vote, which is a topic that we're going to come on to in a moment. Which is you need ID to vote. And annoyingly, they've made it so that it's ID that is very likely to be in an older person's wallet, but very unlikely to be in a younger person's wallet for some reason. I can't imagine why. Anyway, Lee Korn saying hi. And Duke Vengeance saying hi back to him. Lee is telling us that he's discussing the premise for a new retro game called Mank Minor about the main character Liam swaggers about collecting bottles of Vimto. Which sounds great. To the opening two bars of Step On by the Happy Mondays, played on a ZX Spectrum beeper. I think it's a winner. I would invest in that. Put that on Kickstarter, Lee. I would invest in that. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. Duke has said that he's watching the Trump arraignment on another stream. I don't think it's going to happen till 7:15 our time. I think he's actually going to go down. It'd be really interesting because I want to find out what he's getting done for. Does he know? Does he know what he's getting done for? Has he been told?
I mean, you'd imagine so.
I don't think he has.
Happens when you've read his rights.
Yeah, I think it's like literally what we're doing here. Well, I know about the Stormy Daniels thing, but there's another like 30 charges against him on top of that. Houghton's got a good point. He says, does Labour uniquely have a purity issue? Feels like a constant battle sometimes of both sides of the party shouting about each other about who represents Labour. Corbyn / Starmer, prime example. Yeah, but I mean, I think the big difference for me, as someone who was a member of Labour until 2017, and then I left the party, I've now come back to the party, I'm not that wedded to Starmer. And I would find it really weird if people who were Lib Dem were still banging on about, oh God, I've forgotten her name. Who was the leader in the last...
Joe Swinson.
Joe Swinson. Imagine if every, Lib Dem you met was going on about Joe Swinson and how she was cheated out of that election, how she should have won and how it wasn't fair. And you'd be like, dude, that was 3 or 4 years ago. Move on. So that's the way I kind of feel like that. But yeah, purity tests are a big thing. And when I had a bit of a ding dong with old Thingy Jones, Owen Jones at the Labour Party conference last year, he made a big point about the fact that I hadn't voted for Labour in every election in my life, And I was like, well, I haven't. I once stood for myself as a candidate just because I said I would. But I'm not wedded to Labour in that way. And I think the people that are, there's a whole thing about the people on the right look for converts and the people on the left look for traitors. And I think we've got to stop doing that. Get rid of these purity tests. They drive me up the wall. But yeah, gatekeepers. You're just not left-wing enough, Josh. Go away. Go join. And if you want to get people on side, the worst thing you can tell them is to F off and join the Tories. Just don't say that. Just don't. I mean, they won't join the Tories, but they might not vote for you.
Well, I mean, people do anything, don't they? I mean, to justify their positions. I mean, the people on the right are, especially in the Conservative Party, are, much easier to unite around an idea because it's generally got some sort of selfish benefit. Right?
Yeah, they're gonna make money out of it. Hey
They're going
guys,
to make money out of it.
who
So
likes
it's like,
money?
okay,
Let's make money.
yeah, we'll drop our differences because we're both going to get rich, right? So what does it matter, Whereas, the people on the left and the progressive side, and in the center as well, of course, I think we actually do care about principles, and, there's this joke that we're always arguing about the right way to do the right thing. And it's true, right? We're arguing so much about how to do the right thing that we forget that doing any version of the right thing is better than the crap we've got right now.
Yeah.
And that actually it's better to debate, how to deliver a good thing rather than whether, one person's version of a good thing is better than someone else's. Yeah. It's like, let's just get on with it. Let's start with one, move on to the next, right?
I'm very much with you on this, Josh. I was reading about the CIA used to put people into organizations like green organizations and black power organizations that it didn't like in order to mess them up by just wasting everyone's time. And there was a big list of how to waste people's times in like volunteer organizations, and it was
they
things
don't need
like
to do it anymore,
arguing.
We're so good at doing it ourselves.
Well, maybe it's the CIA. Maybe that's what I'm saying. It's like arguing over minutiae. It's arguing over the color of the logo, arguing over stuff that doesn't matter. Put people who are competent. Don't give them anything to do. Just make them feel excluded. And the people who aren't competent, give them the best roles that they could possibly have because they're going to be incompetent. And you look at some of the non-profit organizations that you and I have probably been involved in over the years. And I'm reading this list going, oh my God, people will, because you know what I'm like, let's do the show right here, just get out and do it. But so many people go, oh no, what if it doesn't work? What if no one turns up? And there was a big thing during the Remain campaign of like not having a protest. It was a thing because if not enough people turned up, then it would be seen as a failure and people would laugh. And I was like, people are going to turn up. It doesn't matter whether it's 100 or 100,000 or 1 million. It's like, if people want to go and protest against the flagship, policy of the Tory party, I think they should go and protest. And it was just shown up by the, do you remember the March to Leave? With Farage, where he left from Sunderland. And it was like
18 people.
18 people and a dog. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, that was it. That didn't affect the chances of Brexit going through. It was just like, okay, let's laugh at this for a little bit. And then we found the next thing to sort of think about. So that's sort of like my attitude was always, let's see we don't know what's going to work, so let's just throw everything against the wall and stop telling people they're doing it wrong.
I mean, the other side of that, of course, is that for decades there have been lots of people, experimenting, researching, trying things out all around the world about how to do pretty much everything in society better. Yeah. So we don't even really need to invent anything. We just need to go and pick and choose what we want from other things that have already been done around the world, right? I mean, you can point at several countries around Europe and go, oh, well, they do schools great. We should definitely do schools the way that they do schools. Or they do policing great. We should do policing the way that they do it. Yeah. I mean, while we're debating, again, this, the right way to do the right thing, the other side of just, they're launching a free word slogan and kicking our asses, right? I mean, that's it. That's what they do, whereas we're stuck in consultations and, and committees.
I lost count of people telling me how great the Labour Party manifesto was in 2019. I was like, have you read it? And they're like, no. I've read a summary. I'm like, who's going to sit down and read a 100-page?
I mean, yeah.
Who's going to read a 100-page booklet? No one. Right. That too. I mean, it's hard enough to get people interested in politics as it is, but to go, well,
there is a paradox with that where, if you don't present enough information, you get called out on that. If you present too much, you get called out on that. Oh, yeah. And of course, what you need is both.
Yeah, a good 3-word slogan.
Yeah, you need a good 3-word slogan. You do need a good campaign ad. You do need a good newspaper editorial. But you also you need the detail because someone will go, oh, how are you going to pay for it, or whatever kind of typical cliche call out they have.
Have I told you my campaign slogan for the next election for Labour? Let's reboot Britain. Yeah.
It's good.
Thank you.
There is a campaign, Reboot Britain.
Is there? Oh, damn. Someone else has thought of it.
I know them pretty well,
The Simpsons already did it. Oh, damn.
This is the thing. Language is hard, right? And again, like you said earlier, you've just got to start with something. You've just got to start. You've got to put things out there. Because in the kind of commercial world, it's better to try out a bad idea in front of your first 100, people in the audience than, trying out a bad idea when you've got to go on primetime TV in front of 1 million people. You want to screw up early so you can fix it and learn what works and what doesn't work. So we should be trying all sorts of things right now. And I think that extends to policy as well, right? We should be throwing policy out there and saying, look, here's a way of doing something and see how it lands. If you wait till the last 5 weeks of an election, I mean...
Yeah. I had this discussion with some Lib Dems. I went to the Lib Dem conference a few years ago, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, just say you're going to legalise drugs. And they're like, what? Just say it. You're not going to get into power. You're not going to win an election. Just say it, and you will be on the front cover of every single newspaper for days. It's free advertising for the Lib Dems. Oh, what are they going to do? They're going to legalise drugs. And it will start the conversation about the legalisation of drugs, for instance.
You're going to push the Overton window, right? So, I mean, the one I want to try out is ban all cars.
Ban all cars, yeah, brilliant.
Because it's like, okay... Now we're going to meet somewhere in the middle on this, aren't we?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Rather than, meeting on the upper extreme. It's like everyone has free cars and petrol's free and, put lead back in.
Let's
pick the opposite end of the argument and then we'll meet somewhere in the middle. And this is literally, what the right do all the time. It's like, Trump's basically, build a wall, ban the Muslims, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
He was just going extremely good. Because then the point is he gets dragged back, but they still get pushed in, the country still gets pushed in his direction.
Yeah. But why is it? What's wrong with the left? Why don't they learn? There's a great clip from the TV show, not Broadcasting, what was it called? There was a TV show with Jeff Daniels in, and it was written by...
Newsroom.
Evan Sorkin. Yeah, Newsroom, that's it.
Yeah.
And he's saying about America, and he's like... He started slagging off America because it's the bottom for literacy and all that in the developed world. Yep. And then he says, oh, and liberals, you're Democrats, you think you're so smart. If you're so smart, why do you lose all the time? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, this sort of thing seems really obvious to me and you, but obviously not to the people who actually get to make the decisions.
But going back to our conversation earlier, I mean, actually in America, the Democrats quite often win the popular vote. So they actually are winning quite a lot of the time. And the same could be true here about people that are behind progressive policies. Actually, people are voting for progressive parties more than they're voting for the right. Britain is not conservative, small c, right? We may be in some aspects, but in the big sense, Britain is actually progressive. And you can see that literally in the voting, right? Yes. Going back however far you like. That's not even just.
Yeah, but we don't know how to weaponize that. We don't know how to maximize it. I mean, a really good example in America, for instance, is that when Obama was coming to the end of his tenure as president, there was a slot in the Supreme Court and he couldn't have his pick to go in. They said, no, we have to wait till after the election. So Trump got to pick. And then the same thing happened when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in August, I think, of 2020. And there was an election coming up, but they still managed to get a new Supreme Court justice put in. So Trump got 3 Supreme Court justices in one term, and Biden's not going to get any. And considering the picks from Trump were quite young, and it's a job for life until you die, like being the Pope. It's going to be a Republican Supreme Court now for the rest of our lives, probably.
Yeah. I mean, we care about hypocrisy, right? They don't. They have no shame. They'll do whatever they want. I mean, the very idea that the Democrats should work with the Republicans, when actually the Republicans have never worked with the Democrats on a single thing.
Yes, that's so true.
It's a complete joke, Yeah. And I can see people in the comments, Colin there saying that the Democrats don't even equal progressive. I mean, yeah, of course they don't. But there are people in the Democrats that definitely are, and the point is to push in America, the only other option to push them in the direction that actually represents the country.
Yeah.
Right. And the same is true here. I mean, I'm by no means, when I use the word progressive, suggesting that the entirety of the very broad church that is the Labour Party is progressive. However, a lot of their voters are, and a lot of their parliamentary members are a lot more progressive than the Conservatives. And what we need to do is demonstrate that the country is, right? And just to say, actually, look, these are vote-winning policies. Don't just do what the Daily Mail says. That is not the only narrative in the country.
Yeah.
When you look at what we actually turn up for and what we care about in our communities, and then, that's a baseline. The extension is What about doing incredible things for everybody, right? Think about the way that we manage our society as investing in our future, rather than just, as Sunak has been, in the media recently, plugging the potholes, right? That's not their job. It's part of their job, but actually it's about thriving, and it's about opportunity, and it's about, all the things that we could be doing as a society. It's the baseline that we have right now is such a low bar and not aspirational, and we could be doing so much more. I mean, just like there is clearly enough of pretty much everything society needs, and obviously it's a cliche to say that it's just not well distributed, but the point is there is enough food, there is enough water, there is enough energy, there is enough housing, there is enough of pretty much everything we need. My God, what we could do with it if we just all had access to it, right? I want a Star Trek world, not a Mad Max world. I know those are two extremes, but currently, we're on a trajectory.
We are veering very rapidly towards the Mad Max world.
Yes. Exactly. And turns out giving people things like access to education helps a society. It's an investment. It's not a burden. And why wouldn't you invest in the intelligence and the of your citizens? It turns out housing is an investment. Why would you want your citizens homeless or on the debt line? What possible good does that have for your country? I mean, it's really, really simple stuff.
But it keeps the evil people in power. Can I just say hello to Max? Hi, Max. How you doing? He's watching there, and Tommy Gunn as well. Houghton's asking, would you say we are socially progressive? If so, is the culture war approach a poor approach from the Conservatives, and how should Labour counteract it?
So my personal opinion is, and I know this is a very difficult one, but we should essentially stick our fingers in our ears when it comes to anything the Conservatives are saying, and get on with promoting things that are actually popular, things that people actually want, and the real outcomes of them. It's about future vision, right? And one of the things that the Labour Party has called out on, and I understand both sides of this argument, is that it's hard to know what they represent at the moment and what they want and who they are. Partly, of course, a couple of people in the Labour Party have said, don't want to give all our ideas away, right?
Oh, what? Like, well, I hate that.
Yeah, first off,
give them away.
Adopted,
you can't copyright them.
Ideas, yeah, I mean, we know now that if the Conservatives said, oh, yeah, we'll do all that stuff, well, it'd be a lie, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be true.
Yeah, I know. But if they did, great. If they did, fantastic.
Putting out all these progressive ideas would start the conversation about them. And if you're going to get called out for anything, and let's face it, the Labour Party is going to get called out whatever they do, get called out for good ideas, get those good ideas in the media, get people debating them.
Yes.
Right? So that's my opinion on that.
Well, that's huge, isn't it? Getting it out into the media, and it's
Own
so difficult.
The narrative. Yeah. There's a free slogan.
It's so difficult with society and also political parties that are obsessed with the past. They're obsessed with winning elections through leafleting. They're obsessed with newspapers and writing articles in newspapers that no one reads. No one under the age of 50 reads newspapers. Yeah. What's the point? I mean, like, you can have such an effect through social media. You can have one post, one tweet, one video get 1.6 million views. That is an insane reach that you're never going to get with leafleting. And
but we need to
share it organically.
We need to turn that into action, though, as well, right? So, all the content and the reach is what is simply the activation piece of the puzzle. But then once you've activated people, you've got them angry, you've got them motivated, you've educated them, you've given them an outlet or something to get behind. Then you need to mobilize them. Then you need to give them something to do, right? So activate, mobilize, and very, very simply doing starts with voting. The second thing to do, of course, is to tell people why you showed up, right? What am I showing up for? Why am I voting? It's not, voting itself, democracy itself, not really that sexy. Like, it's true, people don't care enough, right? However, the things that you get from voting, those are important, right? You get your agenda on the table. You get people caring about the policies that you care about, right? All of a sudden, they're there because you put them there for a reason. And if they don't do that, then of course you're not going to vote for them next time. Now, currently, under first past the post, that's not entirely true. Safe seats mean basically you can do what you like, regardless of whether the majority of the people in your
And you can put a rosette on a pig and it'll still get elected in that constituency.
Exactly. So there's another reason for PR is that actually it brings more accountability, not just representation. Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump into a little bit of the chat. We got Max saying gay rights was fringe until everyone was talking about it, which is very true.
Exactly.
Colin's coming back to us. He's saying newspapers can cover vital information, Financial Times and your portfolio, retirement, etc. Yeah, they can, but it is quite fringe. It's not mainstream, especially with younger people. That was my point. And Max is saying get people talking. One of the things is it's a lot easier to get young people interested in politics than it is to get an older person to change their mind, especially if they have thought the same way all their life. What are you going to do? You're going to have an intervention. I mean, I'm sorry, but you in the time that you spent trying to convince one old person to stop voting Conservative, you could have got 20, 30, 40, 100 young people interested in politics. You don't have to tell them who to vote for.
There's so someone I work with who helps us with some comms, they basically said, there's three groups of people in your audience, right? There's the people that are already on side, right? They're DMing you and they're kind of like liking all your content and they're like, yeah, this is all everything I want, and they're cheering you on from the sidelines every moment. Then you got the people that are the complete opposite, right? They're never, ever going to be convinced. And in fact, all they do is troll you or ignore you, right? And, sap your energy. And then what he said was, those two groups, you can basically ignore them both, right? The ones that are on your side, you can actually ignore them. They're going to do whatever. They're with you. And the ones that are never going to be on your side, waste of energy. In the middle, there are all these other people, right?
Yeah.
All these other people that are just, on the fence or wanting to find something new or understand what's going on or be given something to do, right? And that's actually the majority. And those are the people that everyone should be trying to talk to, We sit in our bubbles or we get distracted by trolls, but actually it's everyone else we should be talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, and then following on from this, we need to talk about voter ID. So the government have brought in a law that says from now on, and this means for the upcoming local elections. Do you have elections in your area, Josh?
We do, yeah.
You do, because I don't have them here in the bunker in Northern England. But you need ID. And as I said earlier, the government has made it so there's a list of acceptable ID. And what is included in that is things like an over 60s Oyster card, but not a young person's Oyster card. What is included in that is a Freedom Pass, which a lot of older people have because it's free. What isn't included in that is student ID. The student ID that you need to get into a university, the one that you need to get into a library with your photo on it and a barcode. Yeah, you're not allowed to use that. And it seems to me like voter suppression. Simple as that, because they know that two-thirds of older people are more likely to vote for the Conservatives and two-thirds of younger people are more likely to vote for Labour or Progressive.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of research and even, right-wing people, especially in America, on the record saying, yeah, we don't want people to show up. When more people show up, that's when we start losing, right? They know it. They do know it. On the voter ID point, I mean, first thing to say is postal votes, right? Register for a postal vote. It's the most reliable way. And in fact, it's even the most reliable way to make sure that you end up voting as well. There's a lot of research that shows that if you register for a postal vote, you're just more likely to vote anyway, but you don't need ID. And if you forget to post it, you can actually just take it into a polling station anyway. And that's your vote, right? So that's the first thing to say. Obviously, get your ID. You can get it from the government. As you go through the voter registration process, there's a step now that says get your ID as well. And there's a few other third-party services as well. I mean, we're going to be trying to put something together. The thing is, right, the local elections are going to be the first test of this. And my feeling is that if it goes horrendously badly, like it probably will, then that'll be a big wake-up call. And actually, I think it will probably increase the voter ID numbers for the general election. So it might actually be quite a good thing if it goes badly, if that makes sense, because it would be a really big story.
But it still means more Tory councillors than we should really have. And it is suppression of democracy. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's to combat a non-existent problem, which was voter fraud, in which in the last election there were 28 million votes cast, and of them like 3 of them were wrong. Like the figures are like minuscule, absolutely minuscule.
Yeah, I mean it's millions of pounds per one of those votes that's being wasted on this, right? But yeah, I mean, if it does go badly, I mean, this is the thing. People sometimes need to experience a thing before they want to do something about it, right? And so if all of a sudden people show up at the polling booth and get turned away, then you're going to have this visceral kind of, feeling about your vote all of a sudden, and you're going to, be activated. I mean, if there's one thing the Conservatives are really, really good at, it's creating activists, and like, that I think will be a red line for a lot of people. There have been lots of red lines over the last 13 years, my God. But not being able to vote, I mean, like a month ago or whatever it was, when they came for everyone's mortgages, that was a big mistake. I mean, my God, homeowners, the Conservatives came for homeowners. But now they're coming for your vote. I mean, what does it take to activate people? But I think, being turned away, from the literally the one way that you can actually engage with who our representatives are, I think could backfire on them in terms of activation.
I think it does. I hope it does backfire, because we've seen that in America, where they've tried to suppress people's right to vote, and they've ended up with lines going for miles and people queuing up for hours and hours to vote. In the richest and most successful country in the world, they can't even organise an election.
It's really bad optics.
Where you go in and you just vote. Like in most countries where it takes a second. And they've done that on purpose. They've done that on purpose to make it difficult to put people off. And what I'm worried about in the UK, we don't have as many people who are politically active in the way that they are in America. Obviously, people are quite political in this country. Everyone's got an opinion to some extent, but especially with young people, I always feel a lot of young people I know who would otherwise be interested in politics and what's going on just don't have the time. They don't have the headspace. They are studying. They are falling in love. They're settling down. They're trying to buy a house. They're trying to find somewhere to rent. They're trying to pay the rent. They're trying to go out and party. They're trying to, meet their future spouse. I mean, there's so many things going on when people are young. And older people, when you're retired, not so much stuff going on of that type of stuff going on. So it's a time thing. And so you've got people who have little time and don't really have the headspace for politics being turned off even more, because the few that will, it's not few, but like comparatively few, that will actually go out and vote in a few weeks' time in the local elections, a significant number of them are going to be turned away for not having a driving license or a passport. Yeah. And the government was supposed to do a big campaign so we would all know that we need ID in this upcoming election. And I haven't seen anything, Josh.
I mean, my hope is that all of that turns into the biggest turnout we've ever seen come the general election, right? That's my hope. Because like I said, I think sometimes it takes something being taken away from you before you do something about it. So, I really do think that actually it could backfire in that sense. But yeah, I mean, what else could they do? I mean, the other side of this, right, is like, well, okay, if that goes well, and actually it turns out that they get to win, this election, the general election coming up, what are they going to do in 2030? 7 years from now, so like, what chances do we have in 2030 to get them out if we don't do everything we need to this time around as well? So. They'll do whatever it takes. I think they're using their time, pillaging the country essentially, right? And we've seen that really, really blatantly recently with all the PPE stuff, debt written off, all that kind of stuff. Fraud written off, not debt. What more can they do? And I think there's one thing that takes very little time to do is our last kind of chance, right? The actual vote that we still just about have is our last chance. And if we don't use it, no protest or petition is going to make a damn bit of difference, The interesting thing, and it happened in America recently, and I suspect that's the same here as well, though it's quite a difficult thing to do research on, is that for the first time now in America, the number of Gen Z and millennial voters is a bigger number than the boomers and greatest generation voters. So actually, in America now, they are the biggest demographic. So the under 40s or under 35s, whatever the measure is the biggest demographic. They could show up, dominate, own everything, right? But of course, also, as you and I have just been talking about, young people don't engage very much, and so they don't dominate, they don't own it. If they just knew they were the biggest group, right? I mean, that's the trick, isn't it? The trick is to tell you you're not in the majority, right? Yeah. So I suspect the same is true here.
And to empower people. Empower people. The problem is people feel helpless. And when you make people feel helpless, they're less likely to bother doing stuff, because what is the point? And one of the things that the Tories have done over the last few years is to try and, every way, politically, economically, socially, make people who are either young or not rich feel helpless in the situation that we're in now. And I think that is a narrative that needs combating, and the idea that together we can actually make a difference, which we've been seeing with the strikes that have been going on for the last I was going to say a year now, isn't it? Some of which have actually resolved in the strikers getting what they wanted.
Yeah, and come election time, the Conservatives will be able to hail that as a win, right? We helped. We gave people the wage increases they wanted, and everything else out of our hands, right? So we did the best we could. We caved, all right, whatever technology they're going to use, and they will use it against us, ironically, right? So it's a short-term win, but actually we gave them fuel, I think.
We've got a couple of... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, we've got a couple of messages. We've got Ernie Burns saying, I bet quite a few Tory voters are going to fall foul of this as well. It might be easier for them, but they will squawk loudly if they lose out. They feel such entitlement, which is true. And also, Simon's pointing out, it appears that postal voting bypasses ID. There are no instructions for voter ID with my postal vote, which is correct. You do not need ID for a postal vote. So as Josh was saying, that your best bet is for a postal vote. The other thing you can do if you don't have a passport and you don't have a driving license is that you go to the government website, the gov.uk, just type in government issued ID. They will issue ID to you for free if you supply them with your national insurance number and your name and your address, obviously, so they can send it out to you.
The last thing I was going to say about the changing demographics is that a couple of years ago, when we started putting together the planning for this campaign we're working on, the Movement Forward campaign, I went through various sensor data and that kind of stuff, and realized that between the 2019 election and the 2024/2025 election, there's going to be almost 2.5 million more new young voters that were too young to vote in 2019 that would be 18 or over come December 2024, January 2025. 2.5 million more new young voters. Right, which again, if you look at the stats, are anywhere between 60 and 80% likely to vote for progressive party. So literally, all we need to do, tell them, hey, this is your election. Just show up. Tell them what you want. That's it. Game over. Why would you listen to anyone else if you're a political party when you've got these generations of people coming up that are going to be the majority of your voters now? So this is the challenge. I mean, if you put together, all the voters below 40 years old, right, not only are they more likely to vote left, progressive, centre, left, but they're in the majority as well, right?
I mean, lucky bastards.
Yeah, there's so many more of them that actually that is the audience we should be going after.
Absolutely, right? 100%. And it's about also finding ways of making politics aspirational as well. One of the big problems we have, again, on the left, along with not being joined up in our thinking, is that a lot of our politics is literally the politics of doom and gloom. Project Fear was kind of aptly named. I know it was true, but the argument against leaving the EU was always it'll be a disaster and it will be economically problematic and it will create problems with trade. It was always the negative, whereas the Brexit lot said Britain in the future will be free to do what it wants and we'll have this extra money to give to the NHS and we'll be able to tell all the French people to go away. But it was like, it was all positive stuff. It was things that people were like, oh yeah, I want that. Instead of the sort of the fear mongering, which we do get on the left too much. And I do think that this next election, I would like to see a lot more positive things to vote for, rather than 100%. Just being everyone voting against the freaking Tories, because obviously we do need to get them out of office. But yeah, I know that's a bit idealistic.
I agree. Think about it, right? What was the biggest one? The biggest story of Brexit, right, was that it will save the NHS. There'll be money for the NHS. We saw it on the side of the bus, right? Yeah. Now, that tells me something actually incredibly positive. And I know this is going to sound odd, but that's a positive thing about the Brexit vote, is that actually people showed up because they cared about the NHS, right? They knew, the people behind Brexit, they knew that they needed to use things that people genuinely cared about, because otherwise they had no levers, right? So they used the NHS because they know that everyone cares about the NHS as the only thing they really had, right? So they picked these progressive ideas and they said, yeah, we'll look after those, but you have to vote for Brexit. It was a lie, obviously, we know that now, right? But they knew that's all they had to use against us, essentially.
We got a message from the Freckle Puny here saying, suppress people's right to vote and you can end up with a surge against you next time round, as happened in South Africa, 1990, where millions waited for hours to vote for the first time in their lives.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, let's hope it all blows up in their faces. But yeah, I just want to... Go on, sorry.
Well, like you were saying, we need to get the current government out. I mean, regardless of who or which party would be in power doing the stuff that this government is doing right now, I would be saying we need to get these people out. We need to get them out. Doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
Like drop the party lines, get them out, right?
But that's also a thing as well. It's like when you criticize someone on the right, it's always like, oh yeah, but what if we arrested Bill Clinton? And I'm always like, go on. If he's broken the law, arrest him. I mean, I always like John Burkow, but it came out he was a bully. I dropped him like a hot stone. Like, I'm not interested. I wouldn't stand there defending him when obviously he'd been, banged to rights. There've been so many complaints about him. And I actually know very personally someone close to me who worked with him in the past and said, yeah, that sounds about right to me, knowing him personally. So it's like, there's nothing in it. So I like the fact that we don't have this sort of cult-like mentality generally.
Well, I think, the point is about consistency, right? We're consistent in the way that we would apply the law because everyone, lives under it, right? But also, along with consistency, you have growth and learning, right, as well. So also, we're happy to change our minds and improve things as more information becomes available, just like you said. So those two things are really important to us, as is hypocrisy. And on the right, they will do and say whatever the hell they need to at any given moment
in order to win
or win, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of like getting rid of this current government, I mean, the point is, like I say, it doesn't matter who it is, which party they're from, they need to go. And the annoying thing is, of course, that tactical voting is going to be one of the most useful tools we have, and one of our missions is to mainstream tactical voting as the idea, right? It's like that is the default call to action for pretty much everything. It's like you just vote for the most likely candidate to get rid of your Tory. That's it. Simple. Doesn't matter who it is that you're voting for. Get them out. The counter to that is like, yeah, but that really sucks. I should be able to vote for who I believe in, or people who support the ideas that I support, or is from my community, wherever it is. Like, yeah, it does suck. These are desperate times. Yeah. So make sure while you're doing whatever the hell we need to get the current person out of your constituency, make sure that you're not giving a blank mandate to whoever comes next. It's really, really simple. Tell them why you're showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is the thing. I mentioned this morning. Like, whatever the Tories do at the moment, the things that they get away with, Labour will not get away with that stuff. Labour have one scandal. It will be all over the front pages of the newspapers for weeks because the newspapers hate them. I mean, they're not going to let anything lie like they do with the Conservatives, who just lie all the time. But yeah, it'll be a completely different paradigm. I hate using that word. It'll be a completely different paradigm. But yeah, it will be.
In France, there was polling done after Macron just won the last election against Le Pen, and obviously he won. It was pretty close, actually, but he did win. But the polling basically showed that something like 94% of the people that voted for them just didn't want Le Pen. That was it. That's why they showed up. They didn't want, or they didn't even care about anything Macron had to offer. Yeah. Right? They just didn't want Le Pen. That's a terrible mandate. That's no mandate. That's no mandate for anything at all. That should have been a wake-up call, right? And now they're getting a wake-up call. But the wake-up call should have been, oh my God, everything is so terrible. We've got to improve people's lives. We've got to do everything we can to actually offer people something better, right? And in fact, what did they do? They're like, oh, well, we won. We can carry on because apparently people like what we're doing. It's like, no, And it's really clear that's not why people showed up. Like really, really clear. Get out of your bubble, improve people's lives. Again, it's not hard, right? If you improve people's lives across the board, and not just the people that voted for you, but the people that would never vote for you as well, it disarms anyone who might try and come against you.
But this is one of the reasons why I wish Labour would adopt PR. Now, in the conference last year, we voted on it, and the vote was to support PR. And the leadership said, well, we'll discuss it later, and kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. Now, the thing is, if Labour do that, they put it in their next manifesto, then yeah, everyone who would otherwise vote for the Greens or vote for the Lib Dems, in particular constituencies in which the Labour candidate, is the only person with a real chance of winning against the Conservative or whoever, they will be way more likely to vote Labour just this once, in order to get PR. So next time in 2029, they can actually vote for the party that they want to vote for and get that representation in Parliament. Because it does seem mad to me. What's the stats on how many people you need to vote for you in order to get an MP into Parliament? It's like, for the Tories, it's something like 20,000 people. For Labour, it's twice that. For the Greens, it's like 1 million. You need 1 million people to vote for you, and you get one MP. And defending that. And also, we need to do away with the House of Lords. We're coming up to the end now, so we don't have time really to go through all this. But there was a proposition put forward by Will Hutton, this is back in the 90s, of reforming the House of Lords and having the House of Britain instead, which was a Senate that represented the 4 constituent parts of the UK, and no one of those 4 parts could impose its will over the others. So quite a nice little setup. So if you had something like, the Brexit vote, it couldn't necessarily be imposed on the whole of the United Kingdom because Northern Ireland and Scotland voted against it. It would be deadlocked. It wouldn't go through. So it would have to be something that at least 3 constituent members of the United Kingdom want to go ahead with. Now, people on the right will say no, especially English people on the right will say no to that. But then what's the point of us being the United Kingdom if we're not going to give equal rights to the different parts of the United Kingdom to be able to have a say in their future? So federalised.
Totally.
Yeah, go on.
I think, devolution in various forms, proper funding in various forms as well. We've seen Conservative councils get more money recently than Labour councils. I wonder why that is, And then, of course, they're told, you just got to raise council tax, and of course, that's happening in places where they're opposition. So that's all strategic. But the point is about, this top-down and bottom-up representation, So, yes, the people in Parliament should represent us. So should our councils. People on school boards. I mean, in America, they go after every single elected position and they try and get people in, right? So, you need representation, but you also need accountability. You need the right level of funding. You need, essentially a strategic approach to running the country as well, right? There's so much dysfunction. And it's because there's, power grabs or, personal priorities or whatever, and I used to work in government procurement, and so I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent, but every council thinks they're special. And actually 95% of what they do, every other council does exactly the same stuff, right? And it's like, okay, that's great. Let's just commoditize, off the shelf most of the stuff because it's really boring and no one cares about it. And we can make it cheaper and better anyway.
Yeah.
What's really important for you, right? Let's focus on the stuff that's really important in your town for your community, and you could extend that all the way up to a national level. And I would take it even further. I would say take that to a global level, right? I mean, national politics is kind of a distraction from global politics and local politics, really, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a much bigger conversation for another time.
Well,
yeah,
listen, I've got until Trump gets arraigned at 7:15, so you can babble on. But I believe you've got an appointment at the pub, mate. So I mean, I don't want to keep you here.
We can keep going for a bit. We can do the after hours.
You lucky bastard.
Members only, right?
Yeah. I'm going to be getting I'm going to be making popcorn. I'm going to make some popcorn and sit and watch the telly and watch Trump.
So just on the representation point, there's this thing I realized recently, and that is that almost nobody is represented, even the people that won. Right now, let me explain why that is. If you didn't vote at the last election or any previous election, then clearly you're not represented. You didn't vote. You didn't even try and get representation. Right? If you did vote, but your candidate lost, you're not represented for obvious reasons. Your vote was not necessarily wasted, as some would say, but it's essentially a wasted vote, right? If you did vote and your candidate won, but their party didn't win, well, guess what? They're in Parliament, but they don't really represent you properly because they've basically got no power and no say, right? So yes, they can get a soundbite in occasionally, but you again haven't got representation.
Yeah.
The interesting part then becomes, right, well, if you voted Conservative, and your candidate won, and they clearly won, they are the government, but actually they're not doing anything you want either, right? So they're not represented by them either, right? So like literally nobody is represented right now. And so what PR does, and this is a thing that a lot of people would call out because, it's like, designed by committee, is it makes government collaborative, right? And It actually brings lots of voices to the table, and every vote counts, apart from the ones where you didn't vote, of course. But even if you showed up and your party isn't the biggest, your vote did count towards the number of people that they have in Parliament. And that's really important, because it actually means that when you stare at Parliament on Parliament TV, like you and I do every Wednesday morning, that everybody in there actually represents someone who voted for them. Yeah. And that actually their voice is as valid as everybody else's. What I want is 650 people who are all there doing the job, working hard, rather than half of them doing the job that actually the other half, the majority of the country didn't even want them to be doing. And then the other half of the room have no say whatsoever. That's ridiculous. I want 650 people doing the job, not 380 people doing the job that some people want them to do. That's not how society should operate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of improvement to be made. You would think by 2023 we've got it all sorted by now.
It's the damn future, isn't it?
It is the future. Where's my shiny jumpsuit? Where's my flying car? Where's my democracy?
Meal in pill form.
Where's my freedom of movement? Where's my freedom to protest? Where's my freedom to strike? Where's it gone? Where's my freedom to seek asylum? Yeah. Where's my representation? Dude, where's my representation? There you go, mate. That's the comedy film that we need to make. A couple of messages before we call it a night. We've got Freckle Puny saying the Tories get away with more scandals. I guess because people expect them to act accordingly. At least subconsciously hold Labour to a higher standard, which I great. Hold Labour to a higher standard when they win the next election, if they win the next election. Hopefully they'll win the next election. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that it would be a no-brainer for Labour to say, if we get in, we're going to consider, or, give the people a vote on PR. There you go.
I think you hear that people don't think it's a doorstep kind of talking point, right? Because they're not saying, what I really care about is democratic reform. It's actually, what they're often talking about is things like, education or the environment and that kind of stuff, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Then when people start saying, I don't bother voting, or what's the point, or they're all the same, or, my vote doesn't count anyway, they're talking about reform, right? So actually, they don't have the words and they don't necessarily know what the answer is. But when someone says, what's the point in voting? They are talking about democratic reform. Yeah. So when you come up against someone, when you're door knocking, that basically says, I'm not interested, why aren't they interested? Right? They are basically telling you our democracy doesn't work. That's literally what's going on. Right? Good point. Yeah, because if it did, they would be interested. It would be doing something for them. So people door knocking need to read between the lines. It's not that hard, right? Why aren't people interested? Because what's the point? because their vote doesn't count. Oh, maybe we could do something about that. Yeah. Right? I mean, yeah.
We've got a note here from Chatty Vat saying in the last presidential election, or presidential connection because of the French presidential election, Macron got 28% of the vote, Le Pen got 23%, and Mélenchon got 22%. If France used the STV instead of runoff for the top two, the result could have been different. Yeah, but that was the first priority, wasn't it? So the second priority, I guess, would have been the same as having a runoff, because that would be a similar thing, wouldn't it? If you don't want Le Pen, it would have been 1-2, wouldn't it, for Le Pen, for Macron, and then the other person, or Mélenchon, number one, and then number two for Macron. So I don't see that. I think it would save money because you wouldn't need to have runoffs. But yeah, single transferable vote. Why not? Bring that PR.
me not being an expert on a lot of this, my simplistic way of thinking about this is, what's a president for anyway? Like, why do you need one particular person to have some particular power that none of us can really put our finger on anyway? Power.
Right? That really freaks me out, mate. The American presidential system, I think, is awful because you have one man, and it's always been a man, who's in charge of, he's head of state, head of the government, head of the armed services, for Christ's sake, also head of the FBI, head of the CIA, head of Homeland Security, head of the Coast Guard, head of the national parks. I mean, it's like, how many hats can you give to one person? It's way too much power.
Paradoxically, can do anything you want, but also nothing at all.
Yes. Well, it's why you often see midway through a presidential run that there'll be midterms, they'll lose control of either the Senate or the House of Representatives. And that's when they tend to go off on daft foreign military adventures, because that's all they can do at that point, apart from veto whatever's coming up from the lower houses. That's it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, I'm bored. I think I'll invade Panama. Which happens surprisingly a lot in American politics. Anyway, we're getting off the topic, and I know that you have a date in the pub to be getting to. So, Josh Russell, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
No, thank you. It's been great to chat.
Little section.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about democracy, and please don't forget, if you are hoping to vote in the upcoming local elections in the UK, you need ID, or you can postal vote it. You don't need ID for that. If you don't have a passport or a driving license, you can use, there's a variety of things you can use, but generally they're for older people. If you're young and don't have them, go on the government website and apply for the free ID that they're offering at the moment. The deadline for that, I think, is April the 25th. So get your skates on, get your ID so you can make your voice heard. And please help us GTTO, get the Tories out. Right, thanks, Josh. You're a legend. And I'll see you all soon. Good night.
Thanks again. See you later.